Welcome to the Bottom Line Podcast with Nicholas Kuzmich, where we discuss what matters most, the bottom line, featuring the top minds in their industry. Now, let's get started.
Hey everybody, Nicholas here, host of the Bottom Line Podcast, where I connect with industry leaders to discuss what matters most, and that is the bottom line. Past guests include people like the OG of high ticket, like Russ Ruffino, the co-founder of Voss Coaching Co., Mikey Siller, and so many more, all of which you can listen to however you listen to podcasts. This specific episode is brought to you by H2H Media Group, which just happens to be a company that I have founded. And we specialize in helping premium information businesses get more qualified leads without traditional funnels using simple common sense marketing. If you want to learn more, go to nicholaskuzmich.com. Okay, so Cole, welcome to the podcast. Rather than reading off some like word for word of what it is that you do and how you do it in some kind of an introduction, why not in your own words, just tell us who you are, what you do, and maybe a little bit about one or all of the companies that you're currently running.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's pretty simple. I mean, what my company is, Closer.io, is a sales training and recruiting company. And so we help people build internal sales teams. So we do that mainly through done-for-you recruiting. And then we also do consulting and coaching in terms of helping the reps ramp up. And also, if they have an established sales team, how to make it more efficient or perform better. And then really, especially in like the services world, we kind of sometimes in our mastermind, that's the shirt I'm wearing now, 8-Figure Boardroom, we kind of help them scale service-based businesses. But really our clientele, we started in the information space similar to you. Now we just really work with anybody who essentially, number one, needs sales reps and provides them with lead flow, right? So like if you have like an inbound funnel and need an inbound type sales rep or MDR, which is an inbound type setter, almost any of those companies, unless you're looking for like overseas Filipino stuff, we don't do that. And then the other aspect is, if you pay any rep a base salary, almost no matter what the position is, if the base salary is a US standard type base salary or a big five English speaking country type base salary, we do that. So, we've worked with everything from solar companies, helping them scale to 9 figures, to medical device companies, helping them scale to 8 figures, tons, hundreds of info companies and, all of that stuff. Some of the best stuff we do actually right now, interestingly enough, is in the cash and private pay healthcare, medical services, and clinic space. Oh. So like, for instance, in 2023, so I started this company in 2019 and, I was doing about $100,000 a month by myself, pretty just kind of chill, trying to figure out really what my offer was and figure out paid traffic, to be honest, because I knew enough to know that was kind of what I was at least how I was gonna unlock the next level scale. I mean, really at that time, I thought paid traffic was like the only thing that you could do, Sure. Now I realize there's a lot of things you could do, but that was like, I was so gung-ho. And then once I kind of cracked the offer, which was, okay, I'm going to do this sales consulting, training, hybrid thing, building teams internally, but also the done-for-you recruiting element. From that point, went from like $0 or $100,000 a month to $2.5 million a month within like 12 to, I don't even know what it was. I throw around numbers, I forget, but it's like 12 or 18 months. It was really fast. It was like, I think it was 12 months, honestly. Yeah. And so then from there, we had a B2C company that we trained sales reps for, and then that was doing 20 million bucks a year. I don't do that anymore. I could talk about why, but it was a good company. I just wanted to focus down. And then in 2023, I started taking equity in clients and taking equity and building a portfolio. Usually you just have a handful of winners. So we had several that, double, tripled, quadrupled, but then we had one that was a private pay healthcare clinic. And we took that from one location and $50K a month. I owned half of the company to 6 locations and $3 million a month in 14 months, which was insanity. I mean, that was like, it's almost like how sometimes in our space, it's like the hardest thing to do in our space is to market and sell because you're selling to marketers and you're selling to the most sophisticated space. So it's almost like I had all of this pent up marketing and sales juju that I just like unloaded into this company.
Into a world that's never seen it before.
Yeah, I was like, we are going to scale this so quickly. And obviously we did. Now, I do not recommend businesses grow that fast. I mean, the company's, it's obviously still around. It's doing great. But man, like we were in for some operational pain, right? We had to like next couple of years of that is going to be like plateauing and just like building infrastructure.
Right.
So it would be much smarter to do like a mature, steady type of growth. Yeah. But, I think I just had all this like pent up scale frustration just like unloaded into this company. It was like, like rocket ship, it was insane. But it's a services-based company. Like those businesses are very operationally complex. I mean, you have all this HIPAA compliance, FDA compliance, patient, scheduling is a whole thing, like
Yeah.
clinic operations, and that was a whole new field for me. So we kind of had to learn that trial by fire along the way. So yeah, I mean that's kind of how I did it. Right now, I'm really just focused on the Closers.io company, which is the sales training and recruiting company, and kind of I feel like I'm 31, so I feel like I've done my phase where I tried to do 900 different things. And now I'm like, okay, I think if I just did one thing, it would be more successful. So I've
Yeah.
restructured everything to just focus on this.
Well, it's crazy. I mean, the stories you have from like where you started, and 2019, not that long ago, right?
Right.
In fact, so let's even start there. Everybody knows you as a closers.io guy. They know what you've built. In fact, in a recent podcast episode, I was having an interview with Russ Ruffino, and I sometimes jokingly allude to him as like the godfather of high ticket because he's one of the guys like
Very,
15
yeah.
years ago who originally came up with this like auto webinar to sales call, and he's figuring it all out. In fact, he even attributed to you, and he's like, what I love. So I attribute some of the original movement of the high ticket industry to him. And then I said, like, when you're looking at the industry now and where it's evolving and where it's going, what do you notice? And he goes, I just love watching people like Cole, for example, who, you correct me if I'm wrong, you might have been, if not the first person, the person to make popular the idea of setters before closers and systems that work with that. And, I guess the software space had.
Well, yeah, yes and no, right? Right. So yeah, I mean, so the setters in the information-based industry, really
Yeah.
that position is called MDRs, marketing
Yes,
development reps. That's what they call it in the SaaS industry. So,
exactly.
if you have two types of people who reach out to reps, right? They're making outbound calls or outreach, right? There's really two types. Do they reach out to inbound leads or are
Yeah.
they generating new leads from scratch? Now we have
Cool.
two
Yeah.
divisions where we do outbound to where
Yeah.
we have like salary plus commission-based SDRs. That's the SDR is the term for
Sales
that
development rep.
where
Yeah.
they're really like they are the marketing function of your business. And there's a lot of advantages to that we don't really think about. I can give you a good story of something, some numbers I ran, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is just crazy.
Sure.
But on the MDR side, that's kind of like what Russ was alluding to, right?
Right.
So obviously, look, that's nothing new. Like that's been around for a long time. I mean,
Mm.
even if you go back to direct mail and like people doing
Sure.
promotions, information marketing with that, somebody would submit their information or they'd buy a book, you ship the book to their house, then you have a sales
Return
rep calling
call.
them based on their information.
Yeah.
So it hasn't, it's not like it's new, right? What I will say is that it went away when the whole kind of auto webinar sort of
Yes.
scene came on, and then it was like auto webinar, and there was like VSL groups, stuff like that. Well, really, groups was more of a setter thing, but especially like the auto webinar. And I worked for Traffic and Funnels with Taylor Welch. I would probably
That's
give
right.
him credit because what happened is when I was hired there, and that's where I kind of started to build a little bit. I was I had several sales jobs before that, but that's really and I was good there. But at TF, that's where I really started to build like a lot of notoriety as like a quote unquote top sales guy in the industry or whatever.
That's right.
And I remember when I came on, he told me like everybody's all about how can you automate on the front end. Like we're going to build a setting team. And that was like a
Fascinating.
weird thing to say in our industry at the time. So I would
Sure
probably
was.
give him credit for kind of the idea.
Got
And
it.
I was one of the people like spearheading the script of like we had newsletter buyers. I'm like, okay, I'm going to call these buyers. And I remember having like all these books out of my desk, and I'm like, I don't even know what to say to these people. And I honestly was crazy. Like, this is how much things have changed. This is my limiting beliefs. I was like, oh, I don't even know if these people are going to want to talk to me,
Interesting.
and honestly, obviously it worked out really well. So like I kind of developed the scripting for the buyers low ticket that were coming into that business. And then we kind of built out like a one-to-one setter to closer type team.
Got
So if
it.
we had like 6 closers, we had 6 setters type of thing. And so like, I laid some of the groundwork for that. Would I take the responsibility for it? Probably not. But then when I started my company, there was no company placing setters. And
Got
there's
it.
no company really
Yep.
teaching how to add an MDR process into high ticket. So maybe I would take more credit for that.
Got it.
But I certainly didn't come up with the idea, I would say.
Sure.
I definitely
Maybe you popularized
it.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, what's fascinating, I totally forgot to make that connection because I realized that prior to starting Closers.io, you were with Taylor and Chris over there, and you were a high performer there. But it's one thing to be like kick ass at sales and understand that more than anybody else. but then you kind of launched into quote unquote internet marketing, like because it was all the other stuff that was involved. What was your training ground, traffic and funnels? Was that where you started to
Kind of. So,
understand that
so,
game?
so I kind of had the luck of like a lot of good things coming together, right? So
Okay.
like my first business when I started, this is like, I'm gonna speed through this, but like my origin story, if you will. I was like gonna go to med school and then I dropped out and I was like, no, I saw these guys that were like health coaches
Yeah.
and bloggers like making all this money online. They had no credentials. So I was
Yeah.
like,
Right.
I was on a track to get all of these letters off after my name.
Yeah.
And so I could basically help people like lose weight and get fit and stuff. So it's kind of like, well, I don't even know why I'm doing that. I've always questioned kind of the status quo. At least I don't know why I do that, but that's
Sure.
always been my personality. So I was like, well, these guys are making like way more money and they're doing this online. They can work from anywhere. And, they don't have all these letters after their name. Why am I doing this? So I
Sure.
dropped out of that whole thing and I stayed bartending and I was just focusing on doing a blog. So I wrote all these blogs,
Like
had no
thinking you were going to
traffic.
be like a fitness health coach.
Yeah, I was gonna like
Canada.
blog. I don't know. I was
Oh
gonna
my
blog
God.
and then figure it out. There was very little thinking through a
Yeah.
video. It was like, I'm just gonna blog, So
Okay.
then I started blogging and I was like, okay, nobody's reading it. So how do you get traffic to this blog? And so I'm like, SEO, I'm trying to
Ah,
learn that. I'm like, oh, this is like ridiculously complicated. So then I tried to learn like ads. And then somehow I got targeted through a course from Sam Evans and I went through that. And then when I did that, I was like, oh, I'm gonna start an agency. Because at that point, like I was kind of passionate about the fitness stuff, but once I learned about like marketing and sales and
yeah.
business, just this industry, I was like, oh my God, like I'm passionate about this, you
Huh.
know? And so I started doing the agency and I did it for e-commerce. And I mean, that was a whole journey. Like I took forever to figure that out. And then I, joined some coaching programs and stuff. And then eventually I
Sure.
got it to like 30, 40 grand a month. And so I was working with like coaches and agencies. So what was nice is, did I make any money doing that? Not really. Like I kind of ran out of money, and then that's why I got into sales. But the nice thing is that like I learned how to buy ads, and
Interesting.
I didn't know the stuff like we don't now. So like I would take on like anybody, So like I was like trying to make something out of nothing. I remember trying to sell this essential oils product, and honestly, like I remember getting it to 1-to-1 ROAS and the
Yeah.
client being super pissed. Like imagine
Right.
that. Like,
Right.
they're acquiring
Right.
customers for free, and
Yeah.
they're like,
But that's a
eh,
problem.
I had no
Yeah.
idea how to set expectations. I didn't do anything, but I learned all this media buying skill set. Well, anyways, I thought that was all for waste because then I got into sales. But then what happened was, then I did a couple of years in sales and I went from company to company and I kind of kept laddering up. Like I started at a company that was just okay. Then I went to a better company. Then I went to TF and then they really became the industry leader, right?
Sure.
And so like I kind of laddered up. And so then so I had that skill set kind of, but I couldn't really monetize it.
Sure.
And then I sort of got the sales skill set. And then along the time I was at TF, the nice thing was because of like them being sort of the industry leader in the space, you kind of get this like R&D in a sense where, and it's like intentional and unintentional, but like you sort of see everybody because you're aware of all the competitors, you're
Yeah.
aware of what they're doing, you're
Right.
also aware of all your clients
Clients.
and what they're doing, and then you see these patterns. You're like, okay, like the founders who do really good and who really scale to like 10 million a year, like they've like the common things with them would be like, obviously they figured out paid traffic. The next thing is like they have these types of price points and then they have a back end. And then the next thing would be like they're also, most of them, and I still agree this to this day, is like most of them took the sales really seriously and they never tried to outsource it. And
Mm.
so like I started to notice all of these things. And then so when I started on my own, I kind of had a blueprint, right? And so that's why I just like exploded. And then I'd say the other thing when I started is there was a lot of, I mean, I think my sales training is very, very good and you can put
Yeah.
it up there with anybody. I mean, even we had a sales trainer at my event last week and we just finished our mastermind and he was like, out of everybody's sales training, I like yours the best because it's, more logical and da.
Yeah.
But there's like all, when you get into the sales training space, there's like people who are ex like FBI hostage negotiators teaching sales. And then you got the crazy NLP guy and you got Eli and he's got like Tony Robbins. He was the Tony Robbins guy. So there's like a
Yeah.
lot of like red ocean there. And what
Yeah.
I did is I just kind of looked at the space and I was like, all of these guys are just so obsessed with their sales training. And like most people just need like the
The
basics. So
basics.
like I was like,
Yeah.
what I have is good enough right now. What I'm going to focus on is not being the best sales trainer, but being the best person at selling sales training and marketing sales training. And so I really spent a lot of my time on like, how do I get the offer right? How do I get the marketing right? And how do I sell this? And then
Right.
part of getting the offer right was adding in the recruiting. And then also just like really like I just but coming back into it, I just paid a bunch of people who I knew all the top agency owners in the space too. And so I was like, I just paid them for consulting, and I was like,
Right.
hey, how do I, what's the new stuff on ads? And then I got really good at, I ran all my own ads, even doing 2.5 million a month. I was doing all my own ads for the most
Wild.
part. I wasn't pushing the buttons, but like I was directing
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And so like that was the last exec hire I made was CMO, so like I know that really well too, even though I'm not known for it. I know that really well as well. And so I kind of like all of those things sort of like came together. You kind of have a little bit of like a luck of things just kind of coming together all at one time. Plus, it was a good time. Like 2019 to 2022 in our industry was really, really good.
Sure.
So I had hit a good timing that way. The setter thing was like a trend. So I like kind of like hit that at the right time. I was the only person doing it. And then, I got like Frank Kern, he was a really good client, and then he gave me to somebody else. And the next thing you know, I got
Oh, so
Bean, and next
leveraging.
thing you know,
Yeah.
I got Tony
Yeah.
Robbins, and I'm like, okay, I'm working with everybody now. So they got to a point where I was like, well, I guess I'm doing this for the like next 10 years because like I'm just like
You're not
this is
going
like I
back
was
to
like
writing a
called
blog
to it,
anymore.
And it was funny is like along the time of scaling, I always thought like, oh, this recruiting thing, like it's done for you. Like, this is back before. Now there's a lot of 8-figure service
Yeah.
businesses.
Yeah.
But back then, one of the patterns I saw with all those clients that were in our mastermind when I was a sales rep, none of them were done for you. And so I was like, oh, I can't do done for you.
Mm.
But, I started doing it, and, it's like, I always had these limiting beliefs of like, oh, this won't be the thing long term. I'm gonna have to do this other thing. That's kind of why I did RCA, is I thought like, oh, that's a
Interesting.
B2C. It's more of a coaching program that'll scale. And then what's funny is like the done for you thing, like we never really broke fulfill. We had to pause it sometimes and stabilize and build infrastructure. Like you can't just blow it up like I did that one company.
Yeah.
You can't just like rapid scale it. But now it's like, there's no reason it couldn't do 5 million a month, 6 million a month, 8 million a month. Like I have the model and it works.
Yeah.
It wasn't easy, but
Yeah.
like, I'm actually grateful for it. I'm grateful I went through all of that stuff because that operational complexity it takes to do recruiting at scale at a very high quality is like it's a moat around your competition. Because if I would have known how hard it was going to be, I probably never would have done it. It was like such a
That's fascinating.
it was really difficult,
Yeah.
And as you're scaling too, it's like you're always trying to catch up and you're going to drop balls. But now, we've stabilized for like 2 years. So like now the product side is like the best it's ever been.
Yeah.
And we're kind of ready, 2025 to
To
really
keep
kind
up.
of like take things back up.
Yeah, there's a couple. Well, there's a crap ton of stuff you mentioned that I want to kind of allude to a little bit. One, I think that would be beneficial for some of the listeners is like now you said you have the model, like getting to the point from 2019 to working your way up. It was less model. It was like figuring shit out, right? It's like try this, do this, put it all together. Oh my God, we're growing so fast. Now you feel like you have a model to get, would you say almost any company there? And if it is on a really high level, what would you say is that model for people to start considering and wrestling with?
Yeah, model for any company to scale, you're saying, or
Yeah.
model for us to work with any company in terms of sales?
The
Recruitment
first one, like
process?
model for a company to start actually scaling, utilizing everything you learned in the past, however
Yeah,
many.
yeah. Well, look, like, so on marketing, so let's just say to get to 10 million, right? Like, I would say, no, number one, you really only need one marketing channel. Sometimes, like, if you have
Good
two,
point.
that's totally fine. And one really good acquisition system, one really sound messaging platform that you're kind of operating from. That could mean you have a bunch of ads, but they kind of all have the same big idea, right?
Yeah.
And they all have like, okay, the same, for the most part, the same marketing process and,
Yep.
and funnel, so to speak.
Yep.
And then usually it's, just one sales team selling the same front end product. And maybe occasionally you sell some of your back end on the front end. Then the next thing is a back end. I would say from a fulfillment standpoint, that's why, any company, it just depends on the company, right? In
Sure.
our space, generally, it really depends, but generally what I see working the best is a combination of like, okay, you still have your course content, you have a community around that, you
Mm.
have what else would the group coaching calls or group support or whatever that is. Like that's kind of the standard. I don't
Yep.
think that's enough. And so as you scale, like what I recommend people do is building CSM teams. And so, a client success manager to do the onboarding call, to do check-ins, to do coaching. And, our team does the upselling too. Like one of our account managers yesterday closed 231,000 in deals. Like,
As
so
as
our
a
people,
CSM.
that was yesterday. Yeah, as a
Yeah.
CSM. So like they do upselling and cross-selling. Now there's certain, my account managers are also good salespeople because we teach sales,
Sure.
So that works for us. Generally, I recommend the CSMs kind of be as setters for a dedicated back-end salesperson, and that person sells the back-end program. But if you can get like a good percentage of people to upsell into the yearly and then renew, and then that way you kind of have a built-in continuity that's more high ticket that way. And then you still have the front end. I mean, that's for info, like that's kind of the general model, but it really depends because there's different markets, right? So like if you look at kind of B2C, you can kind of do a little bit less support. I still think CSMs are very, very key, and even your most B2C niches that they are. Then if you have B2B, you definitely need some more support because there might be
Right.
done for you components. So you might have the CSM team, but if you're like us, we also have the recruiting team. So the account manager is kind of the point of contact, but they have to navigate with the recruiting team. We also have a copywriting team to help clients sometimes with their marketing. So like it's almost like an agency where you have like the account manager, but then certain, you might have tech and then this and then that. So that's kind of on the B2B side. Then there's the
Yeah.
B2 solopreneur side, which is almost like a little bit in the middle. Like B2 solopreneur is like if you work with a coach, if you
Yeah.
work with an insurance agent,
Yeah.
if you work with financial, it's kind of like B2B, but it's really
Not
not.
quite B. Yeah.
You're not really selling to a business, you're selling to a person, even though that person is a business,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
So
So I think it just depends. I mean, obviously, I certainly don't have this key to scale, any company.
sure.
Every company is different. But in our industry, most can fall somewhere in those buckets. Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned more than once, which is why I want to bring it up again. Is almost like, I don't know if you use the exact word luck, but you did say like right place, right time, good trend, on the uptrend. I realize this, I realize that. Luck is not something we can quantify or qualify, but it seems like it favors certain people over others. Like what role did luck play in it? And if you had advice on how to lean luck in your favor, like what could you say to that?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I mean, have you heard Naval's thing on luck? He talks about there's 4 different types of luck.
Okay, no, I
I
haven't.
can't, I can't categorize it or think of it. I'm sure somebody could come up with
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's different types, right? There's like dumb luck. I know that's one of them where it's just like you literally just got lucky. There's another one that's like earn luck where it's because of your action. So I
Ah,
think all of those things
interesting.
kind of quantify for it, right?
Yeah.
But I do think it matters a lot. I would say this, like if somebody was trying to be successful in this industry, you know, I think you can I think you can hit 7 figures really without much luck,
Just
if
follow
that
systems.
makes sense.
Sure.
But the magnitude of success, luck will play to a degree. But part of also harvesting luck is just staying in the game for a long time and being in the right place in the right time. Certain things like that. So I do think it plays a big role. I mean, it depends on how far you want to go back, right? I mean, I think I'm tremendously lucky because okay, sure, I was, I worked really hard and I was right place, right time. But I was lucky to learn those hard work ethic lessons through some parts of my childhood or maybe during
Right.
like school and
Right.
sports and different. So, if you really like tie it all the way back, okay, we're lucky to just be born in either the United States or Canada or a developed country and whatever you try. Yeah, I think we're tremendously lucky and a lot of it is luck. But obviously, I think there's a lot of agency in it as well. It's somewhere of a blend. I think that's for like the philosophers to answer. But I certainly believe in, a good bit of it. Yeah.
Yeah, no. And then speaking of the philosopher side of things, just a little bit more too, you brought up more than once having limiting beliefs. Now, you didn't necessarily talk about how you overcame them because obviously you had to in order to achieve the certain things you did. But what role did you feel like limiting beliefs played in either holding back what you've built now or more specifically overcoming them, allowing you to build what because some people just say, hey, you know what? Don't worry about what you believe and how you believe it. Like, just go out and do it, follow the systems, make it happen. Other people say the systems only matter as much as you've worked on your own inner mind game. Like, where do you stand on the spectrum of all that?
Yeah, I mean, everybody has a lot of limiting beliefs they got to work through, and it's just
Sure.
personal, internal stuff. I mean, a lot of the easiest ones to break is when you see other people just like if you could see somebody else do it, you could do it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now the problem is that for me, even when I was doing like 100, 200 grand a month with my company, um, there wasn't really, I was a service-based company, right? So
Yeah.
like I didn't really have anybody else to look to who had a model for how to scale this thing. And so I always had a bunch of limiting beliefs around it, but it was kind of funny. Like I would sort of be like, yeah, we'll grow this, but the real thing is going to be this other thing.
Yeah. I
That's
got it.
I mean, for the longest time, even till recently, um, that was always my thing is, yeah, we're going to grow this, but the real thing will be this thing.
Something else,
That was my
right?
main thing. I mean, that haunted me for years. And I think I finally have gotten over that, to be quite frank. But it's like, man, I wish I would have gotten over it years ago. I would be so much bigger of a
Yeah,
company.
right.
But so I'll give you an example. Like when we were doing 200 grand a month with the recruiting, I was like, yeah, this will be a nice 200 grand a month thing, high cash flow, but like the real thing will be our B2C.
Sure.
So we'll keep this around, but we'll do the B2C. And then like we kind of just slowly grew, and not really slowly, like pretty quickly, we were doing 400 grand a month. And I was like, oh, okay, well, we didn't die. We're fulfilling on this. And so I was like, okay, well, and then, same thing. I was like, oh, this will be like a 400 to 600 grand a month company, but it probably is not going to be more than 5 million bucks a year. Then we hit $1 million a month. Same exact thing. I was always like,
Mm,
oh, but I was still very much like, oh, the B2C is going to be the main thing.
yeah.
And then eventually, like at a certain point, I think once we passed like $1 million a month with the company, I was like, okay, no, we can definitely double it. But then I was kind of like, okay, maybe we can get to 2 to 3 million a month. And I was
That'd
like,
be the end.
that'll probably be it. Like that's probably as big as it makes sense to take it. It doesn't make sense to do it after that, blah, 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 blah. And that's when I started taking equity in the clients and I started
Ah,
scaling all this stuff. And
as a thought to scale further, because that would
yeah,
give,
yeah. I
yeah,
was like,
got it.
okay, this is like the platform company, and I'll invest in, if you go to a mastermind and you say some stuff like that too. I mean, see, the thing is like, I'm doing like 2.5, with just this company, I was doing 2.5 million a month. With the B2C, I was doing 1.5 million a month. So we were like doing some huge numbers.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm like a successful person at this point, almost doing 50 million a year. And I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna take equity in these clients. I got this whole thing. I had it all worked out.
Sure.
If you go to a mastermind and you say something like that, nobody's gonna tell you like, oh, that's a limiting belief. It's tough. And even if they would have, I just wouldn't even have listened. It's just
Yeah.
like everybody's gonna be like, oh no, that's a good idea. So then I took equity in all these clients and I added all this complexity, and it was successful, honestly. But like what I learned, see what happened was when I scaled, see, this is the real lesson, is what happened was when I scaled that medical chain,
Yeah.
the way I did it was different in a way from how I did my first company.
Sure.
And with the model I built there, after we got it to 3 million a month and we were dealing with all this like operational stuff, I was like, oh, like if I would have just done this model with my main company and only focused on this and exhausted my talent bench into one opportunity, I could have done all of this
Right.
with one product suite. And then I was like, man, the real opportunity is not even like 2 to 3 months. Like I could get this to, so now my number is like, it's like 4 to 7. I don't know where that comes from. Who fucking knows? But like my number is like 4 to 7. And quite frankly, at 4 to 7, I do have a plan to do something else. So like, I don't know why I
For
just
now.
always keeps doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But who knows? I could be wrong. I mean, I'm going to be a little bit
Yeah.
more wary about it from now on because I'm like,
You see the pattern.
I've just fallen for it so many times.
Yeah.
And the tricky thing is there is truth to it, right? It is look, like I will say that the medical thing I did, the opportunity was bigger in an essence than what I was doing. Like it was easier to scale.
Right.
And there's certain companies like software, for instance, if you have the product right, that's a big if because most people just don't. I've worked with enough. It's really tough to get a good product right.
Yeah.
But if you have that right, the opportunity is much bigger. So that is a real thing, but I think like where the true cap is, I think for me, my limiting belief was always selling myself short with
That's so
that.
fascinating,
So that's
especially
how
with
I
everything
would,
you've accomplished. Yeah.
yeah, that's how I would like summarize it.
Wow.
But I've just had a lot of good learning lessons by doing a bunch of wild stuff, over the years.
Yeah, super fascinating. Can we talk a little bit? Because I mean, there's companies that grow to the scale you have, not too many that grow in the speed you did. And so there was some growing pains along the way, especially with the medical health company. I can imagine like you got the systems in place, but then when you started stepping into worlds that are not true of the information space, and now you're dealing with all this other stuff. I mean, you had to learn on the fly. If you had to, well, let me ask it a different way. Would you ever talk someone out of scaling quickly?
What? Oh, man, it's so contextual, right? Like
Yeah,
it would depend on the market
sure.
and timing and what's going on. Because on one end, it's like, when things are going really well, you really want to capitalize on it because they might not always go well.
Right.
Like I'll give you an example. What I'm doing, like if I start my company today, I would not be able to scale it nearly as quickly as I did back then. So like kind of taking advantage of the growth of that time period was a smart thing.
Because it
Um,
was a wave to ride at the time.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now maybe something I would have changed is I wouldn't have done multiple things, so I'd have been more involved and more
More
focused.
focused.
Because like the issue with scaling really fast is that like you scale and you break things, and then once you break them, you do figure out how to fix it. It becomes very clear once the system is broken, how does it need to be to get to the next level, opposed to kind of trying to figure it out before. But the problem was with us, we scaled so quickly. It was like it really stressed a lot of the team. I hadn't done a lot of the growth that I needed to do. So like me as a leader,
Personally, like,
yeah, just like,
yeah,
it's like, I'm 100 grand a month. The next thing you know, I'm 2.5 billion a month. Like you would only change so quickly as like a leader, and like your lessons
sure.
and maturity and certain things like that. So, it's like I probably personnel wise didn't know how to make the right decisions. I had great people, honestly, but even my ability to lead them probably wasn't as good as it could have been. And
Mm,
then obviously as you scale really quickly, like sometimes, our client results are really good, but like they're not nearly as good as they are now. Right. So like they were good. Like it's not like I was like, ripping people off or something.
yeah,
But
yeah,
now
sure.
it's like, man, like my conviction and the level of which we could service people is like we can just like give them a fucking 20 out of 10 experience.
And
Back
that
then
just
it's
came
like
from the
you're scaling
experience.
so quickly and like,
Yeah, got it.
yeah, when you're scaling so quickly and like you're adding on new talent, like you could add on new talent and then some of the talent doesn't work out and then you churn. And then because the person who's account manager churn, like they don't have as good of experience. So like it's kind of, I think you just have to do it measured and have to do it smart.
Sure.
But there's definitely a balance there because it's tough. In certain times, you do want to just kind of take advantage when everything is working and just
Yeah.
really
Just
double it
go.
down and kind of
Yeah.
swallow the growth. And so, I mean, I think the biggest thing I would do differently is I would have focused on just one thing. Like,
That
if
makes
I would
sense.
have had all my focus on one thing, I probably could have mitigated a lot of the pains that came with that. Even with the medical company, like a big issue with that is I was splitting my focus three ways at the time. I wasn't even fully focused on it. So like I only could be focused on the marketing and the sales, and I wasn't looking at any of the
All the other
operational
stuff.
stuff.
Yeah.
So I didn't even see a lot of the stuff that came around later. I didn't even see coming, because I wasn't even looking at it. So that's
Hmm.
kind of how I would divvy that up. It's a complex. I don't know. It depends.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, what about like you went from, I mean, would you say that at the early days you were a solopreneur, like you were running your own ads, you were doing your own sales, and obviously that had to evolve. Then it became like, so the dynamic shifts when someone goes from like running something solo to then having to be a leader and build teams. What are some of the important lessons you've learned about the whole team thing and becoming a leader? Because you said it was funny. I heard you say something about being a leader to your teams, and I remember I was having an issue with some of our internal people, and a mutual friend of ours, Dan Martell, looked at me in the eyes and he goes, "It sounds like you don't have a problem. It sounds like you're just a bad leader right now." And he didn't mean it as an insult. He just meant like you're looking at the wrong thing. You need to work on your leadership capabilities more than all this other stuff. How did that play a role? Like, what are your thoughts around teams and leadership, especially again when we're talking in this context of scale?
Yeah. So, this has been I have naturally done this really well. It's
Huh.
been a hard thing, well, at least really well to get me to the point where I'm at now. Not
Yeah.
well enough to get me to the point I want to go, I guess. But most people say when they come in that the recruiting and building teams and getting the right people in place, they're like that is a unique strength of this company. And
Mm,
so like when my CMO, he used to be a client of mine, then and he was actually doing a lot of revenue, but then he had a falling out with a business partner, so he came on and now he's my CMO, and we're kind of business partners on a different software that he has. But also he made a presentation last weekend at our event, and it was kind of like what has been his biggest insights from me
mm.
working with me,
Oh,
right?
interesting. Yeah.
And so like, because it's like he was a client, so like he knew kind of like what we taught, right? And like what we were doing. But being on the inside, what has been his biggest insights? And one of the things he said this was a quote from me. I don't remember saying it, but he said, yeah, like apparently I said, getting to eight figures is basically like recruiting and QC. And so QC being like quality control and
Yeah.
coaching and training your people on whatever they're doing in their activities day to day.
Right.
And the other thing that he said is he was like, yeah, I hopped on a meeting and I had this realization. It was like this, I don't know what meeting he was talking about, but it was a meeting.
It
And he was like,
happened.
it was just like a departmental meeting.
Yeah.
And he was like, I thought I had, this is very, very common. I've heard this 25 times
Hmm.
from people who've come work with us, is they'll be like, yeah, like, I knew you had a good team. I didn't realize your team was this good. Or they'll be like, I know recruiting is important, but like I did not realize like the level of how well you recruit and retain talent and how talented your team really is.
Yeah.
So here's the axiom I like
Sure.
is he was saying that, like, look, you can get to seven figures, even like mid seven figures, probably usually by yourself, to get to eight figures, you need you and then a couple pretty solid, like mid seven figure entrepreneurs inside of your company. Right.
Interesting.
So, yeah. And then to get to nine figures, you need a lot of seven figure people and then probably a few eight figure people, which makes perfect sense. Because if
Sure.
you think about a nine figure company, especially in like the services world, what do they probably look like? Well, they probably look like you got two or three people that like run business units
Yep.
that are profit drivers for your
Right.
company. And they have it like if they went out on their own, they could probably build a $10 million a year business.
Right.
Right. Now they might not be able to do it to next year, but
Yeah.
they're like that caliber of person,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And then they're able to lead seven figure people under them.
Yep.
So like I don't know why like he said that. I didn't even say it, but he said that and I thought that was so true because I was like, if you think about like earlier this year, January 2024, we did 7 million in a single month cash collected between all three companies.
Nice.
And since then I went down to focus. But if I think about like, okay, when we were doing that, I had three businesses. It's like I had 8-figure guy in one, and one of them I had another 8-figure guy, and probably a bunch of 7-figure, and then the medical one I probably had like 2 to 3 8-figure guys.
Huh.
And so who knows? Maybe they're not 8-figure guys. Maybe they're 600 grand a month guys. You get the point though, right?
Sure.
It's like if I look at the talent level, it just makes sense of why we did that. But my big realization was, see, I was like, man, I'm so spread thin. I was like, I can't do anything effectively because I got 3 different fulfillments. I got 3 different operations. I got 3 different finance. So like what I realized is, because all of
That
those
was a
companies,
forcing function.
they were built from my talent bench.
Yes.
They were
Right.
built from me recruiting. Like that was my main value add to the
Right.
portfolio companies was exhausting like people I knew really well in the industry into these companies and painting this opportunity. And I
Right.
was like, man, I could have restructured it and done it in one company with multiple business units. That's what I'm doing now.
That makes
And I
sense.
could have had, I could have just a much more successful company and just much more better everything is controlled within this one system. So a good thing to think about, it's not a perfect axiom, but it is, I think it would help a lot of people is like to get to 7 figures, you could do that pretty much by yourself.
Sure.
I know I did that by myself. To get to 8, it's like you need you and a few 7-figure people, right? To get to probably mid 8 figures, it's like you might need like an 8-figure person and then a lot of 7-figure people. To get to 9, you might need a couple 8-figure people, and then a lot of 7-figure people under
Makes sense.
them.
Yeah.
And like your 8-figure people have to lead it's like one of the things that always I struggle with is I'd be like, I really want to recruit this superstar, but like sometimes I'd be like, I don't know if I can get them to report to anybody but me.
Yeah. Sure. Right.
Yeah. And so like when you can find the people that are so good where you can recruit a superstar, but you're like, no, like they'll actually enjoy recruiting, or those people can just recruit those people. Like that's how good they are. So if you think about it like that, it's a good model to think about. I think the through line there is like most people think their team is good, but they don't know what a real good team is. And they don't recruit hard enough. And then also they just don't, spend enough time with their teams. Like a thing I like to think about with the QC stuff is the quality of your company is what happens on the quality of your company is the quality of what happens on the front lines. And so if you think about all the different places your customer interfaces with your company, that
Right.
really dictates the quality of your company, right? So that's everything from the marketing they see, that's everything from the setup process or the sales process, the customer experience and how the customer experience works. Like the quality of the company is really what happens there. And so if we know that to be true, then the managers, the most important thing that they need to do is ensure quality of what's happening on there. And the only way they can do that is QCing what's actually happening on the front lines. So I could give you a million examples. If you're the CSM manager, then it's QCing first and foremost the onboarding calls,
Yep.
the upgrade calls,
Right.
it's coaching calls,
Right.
and just watching what's happening on the front lines and coaching
Right.
people on whatever the accepted standard is. If it's sales, like you're doing a bunch of call reviews, you're doing sales training. I mean, that's kind of like makes sense. but that's the easiest one. But if it's marketing, it could be like copy chiefing all of your copy that's going out, looking at the ad creatives and giving feedback there. And like good leadership is really continuously giving feedback there. And
Yeah.
then like the thing I always struggle with, and probably Dan would be much better than me talking to this, is okay, if I'm like the CEO and then I have a manager, I know my manager should be QCing all that frontline stuff and I can outline them, but how do I coach this person outside
Yeah.
of just one-on-one? It's
Yeah.
like, great, I can have a one-on-one and I can look up Dan's YouTube video on how to do a one-on-one. Great. But like, is there more I can do than that? And what I really found is like, it helps to number one, have a real standard of perfection of like, so for me, like sales is kind of like,
Yep.
I'm probably not going to hire somebody who's doing sales for us that I can't add value to. Like that's my kind of unique thing. So if I hire a sales manager, what I do is I give them certain KPIs in terms of how to manage and I'll do all this stuff effectively. But what I'll do is I'll QC their QC. So the way that works is like if they do a call review and submit it to the client, we have that at a public channel and I'll review that, look at their feedback and see how well their feedback aligns with my feedback.
Right.
Right. I can look at their one-on-ones and see how well are they handling this versus how I would handle it. If I have them run the sales meetings, I could just write coach and just see how they do with me there. Or if I'm not there, I could review the meetings and see how they do that way. Like if you're really invested in leading the person and training them, then that's kind of what you have to do. Now there's a certain other type where you're basically almost acquiring somebody and you're like, yeah, I don't know how to do this. So I'm banking on you to be the one person who just like this thing is, there is certain hires you make where it's like, I'm here to support you and we'll have our one-on-ones and whatever you need me with. But this thing kind of lives or dies with you, And those hires are fine. You just got to make sure those hires are really good. And those hires shouldn't be really within the circle of your expertise.
So maybe this is a limiting belief, and we'll bring this to a close here. When you're talking about hiring these folk, and especially one thing that you said, and I don't know if you meant to say it this way or it came out this way, that you want to hire these 7-8 figure entrepreneurs within your business. And you even said, some of these guys could go off and get the similar type of results on their own, maybe not as quick, but they could. So how do you even, because my limiting belief is then, why would they want to work with us when they could do it on their own?
Let me reframe this. Okay, sure. So there's a couple things here. When I'm saying like, an 8-figure business is you and a few 7-figure entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is it's not like you're taking it literally. They might not literally be a 7-figure entrepreneur.
Sure,
right?
but they have that mindset.
But like what he was saying is if he's on a meeting, like you have a bunch of 7-figure, 8-figure clients, right? You might look at this person and you might be like, this person if they wanted to do it, they're like the type of person who could do 200 million. Right? Yeah. It's like they have that caliber. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so like a lot of our account managers, like, look, if they went on and started their own business, where they get to 7 figures this year, next year, no, like they're gonna have to learn a lot of new skills. But like I'm talking about the caliber of person that they are, right? And also like, just because you can do something doesn't mean you want to do it, right? Sure. And so like they might not want to do it because they're in a season of life where they have kids and they want steady income or, whatever. That's totally cool. The other thing to keep in mind too is like, our account managers, the ones that produce the highest amount, they're like a lot of our really, really talented people who could be like those 7-figure entrepreneur people. A lot of those are our account managers who fulfill on the clients, right? But, like our best guy last month made like 59 grand. Okay, great. So like if he's really going to outperform his income here, he has to, number one, take risk. And number two, like, like, dude,
a whole bunch of new skills. Yeah, sure.
To make 60 grand, I mean, you're at least looking at like 180 a month, consistently. And it might even be more than that, depending on the business. Like, I don't know, sure. So like, that's kind of how I think about it now. To address what you're saying more directly, dude, I will literally take people who have businesses and I'll just paint a bigger opportunity, right? And I will just paint a bigger opportunity and I'll give them upside. So I'll give you an example. Yeah. So the way I scaled the medical company so fast is I wrote 3 funnels, same product, but 3 different problems that it solved in 3 different markets. I wrote 3 funnels. Okay. And then I took 3 of my best talented on my bench that I should have put in my company, but I didn't. Okay. And I took those 3. And what I did is I basically gave them profit share. And then I put this funnel is your business. If you get it to here, you'll make this. If you get it to here, you'll make this. That's kind of what I do with all my divisional leaders. On the sales side, at least. And so essentially, and you can even do it to an extent on the marketing side as well. But that way, it's like that sales, manager, like revenue leader type of thing. I'm like, this is your business. You have kind of the autonomy
Got
here.
it.
I'm lead you. I'm here to QC, et cetera. And then they're kind of driving it, right? So like I can paint a big opportunity where people can make a lot of money. I mean, my best guy last year, there was a month where he made like 121 grand,
Nice.
So like,
Yeah.
you just gotta build these opportunities up with people.
Yeah. I love that. Okay. Second last question then. Just in context, right? Because I think you see things differently than a lot of people do. Like, what is one thing, whether it's about sales or sales recruitment or sales training or sales management, lump that all together. What is it about that people should know but don't? Like, because there's things that people, the jargon you hear, and oh, that's a nice platitude. Of course, sales matters, but like, what is something about that world? If you've got a business and you're looking to recruit salespeople or have the best salespeople or train have the highest close, whatever it is, what is it that they should know but probably don't about that?
Yeah. Well, I'll give you something interesting. So
Okay.
like here, like, in the SaaS space, I have seen time and time again, but now again, when I say time and time again, it's not like I've seen this dozens of times,
Sure.
but when the product is really good, it is the crazy. Like if you come from the info space and then you start to sell a SaaS product and the product is like legit good,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
It is like the craziest, easiest sale you've ever seen in your entire life. You're
Oh,
like,
interesting.
it's so easy, right? So
Right.
in businesses like that, you can, you read books and it's like, well, if sales isn't your thing, find somebody who's been there and done it and then hire and bring them in and then they can build it out for you. I think in an industry like that, when you have when with SaaS, like what business are you really in? It's a product business,
Yeah. Right.
1000%.
Right.
So what we're usually the founders keep their expertise in is
Yep.
product,
Right.
right? And so
Right.
you can kind of hire somebody, and also with SaaS,
Mm,
it's such a big industry. You're more likely to find somebody who's been there and done that to come like be able to take you back up to what their experience level has been. And also like you're not in a sales business, you're in a product business. Okay, back to your space, our space. Info, all right? Unfortunately, this is the truth. It
yeah.
is a marketing and sales business,
Right.
right? So
Sure.
like what business are you really in? You're in the marketing and
Sales and
sales
marketing.
business.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, right? If you can find a way to really make it so that you are in a product business by building something that you can sell high ticket on the front end, but it really is more of a product thing and it's more content. I mean, that's phenomenal. I
Yeah.
mean, a lot of that is SaaS or even telemedicine, but then again, now you're not even in the marketing and sales business. You're in the telemedicine business is like the compliance business. That's what I
Sure.
learned. It's
Sure.
like, oh my gosh, like I want to do all this stuff, but I literally can't do anything because of compliance.
Yeah.
So like, you got to know what business you're really in. But with info, unfortunately, you're really in the marketing and sales business. Even if
Yeah.
you're not
Right.
spending money on ads,
Right.
okay, great. You have a huge YouTube following or you have a huge TikTok and you're marketing.
Yeah.
So like that is like I don't know many
Good
people
point.
who like purely from word of mouth and referrals have like grown a huge info business, right?
It's
It's
a
like very
good point.
rare.
Right.
Um, and so okay, this is what I was going to say that kind of comes back is really like what I see again, and this is what I said when I was working for TF as well, is the founders I see that do the best, bar none, are the ones who really commit to look, you don't have to be me. You don't have to be you don't have to aspire to be the greatest sales trainer out there or whatever. I'm not saying I am, but you don't have to aspire to be, okay, I got to be as good as Cole. You just got to commit to being in info, the best at selling your product or service.
Yeah.
Right.
Got
So
it.
if you sell ADH coaching for parents, right? You just got to commit to being like, I got to be the best in the world at selling this
At
very,
that.
very niche thing. And
Yeah.
that is not a hard mountain to
Yeah.
climb.
Yeah.
Once you can really do that, and then, okay, I got to learn the basics of how to run a sales team. You might not be that great, but like it's tough to outsource it and it's tough to hire it because you know how it is. Like, you're running ads, you have to do a good cash payback with this type of business, right? And you can't afford to just throw a bunch of closers out there who aren't going to close. So like you really got to have that marketing and sales engine dialed. I just find like the people who can really commit to learning that skill themselves in this industry,
That's awesome.
it's very hard to bring it in. If you truly aren't that person, then you might be looking at like a business partner situation. A lot of
Yeah.
my clients, they're 50-50. One person is the back end, one person is the front end.
Right.
Okay, that works, right? Or maybe you're giving away 20%. I mean, think it through before you give away any equity of your business. But still, it's like I do think that's something that I really try to hammer that with people because, and it's not every company by any
Yep.
means. like SaaS is a great example of like the opposite,
Yeah.
but
Makes
in
sense.
our industry, it's like a marketing and sales business,
Got it. Yeah, I love that. Okay, one last question because we're right on time here. Before we do that, actually, obviously, if anyone's in the space and just wants to get more information on how they can work with you and figure out how you can work with them and help them grow their business, where's the best place for them to go for that?
Closers.io.
Perfect. Easy. Everyone know closers.io. Obviously, we'll include those in the show notes. Bear with me on this question. It's asked a certain way for a certain reason. But assume, pretend you're receiving a lifetime achievement award. So you're where you're at now, but everything Cole Gordon does now is stopped. You can't build anymore. You can't do anything. You're receiving a lifetime achievement award. When you go up to the mic to receive the award, who do you think? Who helped get you here? Like who do you think? Mentors,
Yeah.
friends, colleagues, business partners. Who are those folks?
Yeah, look, like I would say, it's kind of a, deep answer, but you know, my mom and my dad, one thing,
Mm,
none of us have perfect parents, but one thing that they did that stuck with me is they always told me when I was growing up, like you could be like, if we ever talked about what do you want to do when you grow up, the conversation was always like, look, do whatever you want when you grow up, do
yeah.
whatever makes you happy. You could do anything that you want. It was
Wow.
like a repeated thing. And there's a
Wow.
lot of things that people, your parents say, and it's totally innocent that hold you back later, right? That was
Sure.
one. I think it's also important to recognize like some of the stuff they probably didn't even realize how much that had an impact, and I
Wow.
didn't even realize it probably till like last year. Like doing a bunch of therapy and stuff. But
Wow.
like wow, that was like a really impactful thing. I'm like insanely grateful for that because even if that was just a thing that they said, because it was a nice thing to say, you're a little child, you're like, oh, it's like you're internalizing the truth of the world,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
like if you go back to when I dropped out of medical school and then I decided I was like, I'm gonna do whatever the fuck I want. And when I called them and told them I was gonna do that,
Yeah.
like I had no resistance whatsoever. They were like, great, So it's pretty good. I would thank them first and foremost, and then my team.
Of
Whoever my
course.
team would be, maybe my
At the
teams that
time.
I've had
Yeah.
over the
Yeah.
years, because that's kind of like your family. And I think that's a big motivating reason of why I do stuff. It's fun to do something you're excited about, but do it with people you
With
love.
great people.
Yeah.
Dude, I appreciate your time, man. I know we're up on time. Everyone, we've been talking to Cole Gordon, founder of closers.io. Uh, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your insights, your wisdom, everything you've done. For everyone else, as we tune off here, remember that there's only so many hours in a day. So stop wasting them and focus on just the bottom line, whatever that is for you. Thanks, everybody. See you later.
Cool.
Thanks for listening to the Bottom Line Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.